Emotional intelligence has been thought to be a driving force in leadership, a holy grail of leadership for many years now. Do you think this is still valid, or would you like to talk about this, whether the mystic aura that surrounds it is actually valid?
Emotional intelligence is definitely very important, not just for leadership, but for any career. Even at lower levels, individual contributors, the more emotional intelligence or EQ you have, the more likable you will be, the more rewarding to deal with you will be, the more calm you will be under pressure, and really you will be able to manage yourself and others better and have more self-awareness. So you cannot overemphasize those importance. Clearly it matters. It's even more important for leaders, because leaders need to have good people skills. They need to be able to tune into other people's minds and emotions and understand how they are thinking and feeling. So not just self-awareness, but being aware of others. And most leaders will operate in situations of high pressure, where managing making decisions under high stakes and in high pressure environments is a lot easier if you have EQ or emotional intelligence. All that said, EQ is not everything, right? And you can certainly think of leaders with high emotional intelligence who would be ineffective if they have poor judgment, if they don't have the right expertise, and maybe even if they lack a little bit of a creative edge. In some of our studies we found that it is often people with lower emotional intelligence who are more creative, more innovative, and who have a greater vision. And really, emotional intelligence is important, particularly for first and mid-level managers, so first-line managers and mid-level managers, because they have to have direct interaction with people and build morale and engage and be calm and predictable. It is not as important when you're looking at the C-suite and strategic leaders. It will still be a benefit, and there's people who argue that you really can't be a good leader if you haven't been a good manager first. If you can't build a team and relate to others, you're going to be too detached. But I would say that it matters less. And there are so many famous case studies. Think about Steve Jobs, for example. He probably had really, really low emotional intelligence. He was highly excitable, very bold. In our dark side personality, he would have had all derailers probably. He was obnoxious and treated people poorly and would throw tantrums all the time, and all sorts of interpersonal problems and handicap. Yet his judgment was amazing. His vision was amazing. He had this ability to predict where the market was going, dream and come up with these incredible ideas for products. And he clearly also knew of his own limitations, so he could build a team around him that could manage others and build a great company, the most profitable company of all times. We shouldn't forget, though, that most people with low EQ are not as brilliant as Steve Jobs. Okay, so most people with low EQ are not that smart, and they don't have great judgment, and they are as bad as anybody's average boss is. If you think about the main character of The Office, either the British or the American one, they will be like that, kind of overconfident, low social skills, slightly deluded, obnoxious, irritable, and they are the people who make other employees quit. In our research, we found that the higher emotional intelligence the leaders have, the more, or managers, the more engaged the teams are. In other words, the EQ of your boss predicts how enthusiastic and motivated you are at work. And this is quite obvious, but the level of output between a person who is really engaged and motivated and a person who doesn't care is dramatically different, even though both get paid the same. So EQ matters is one of the most direct ways to boost team level engagement. Hire people with more emotional intelligence and the teams will be more motivated.
So your team has carried out a lot of research at Hogan on decision making. What do you think the most important thing a leader should do to improve his or her decision making process?
The most important thing a leader can do is understand himself or herself. And not just in our research around decision making and judgment, but in all of the research we've done for the past 30 years, and in all of the research that we've digested and explored, even done by our colleagues and other people, there are 2 or 3 generalizations that always emerge. And one is that people are incredibly predictable. They don't like to hear this because everybody thinks that when they're analyzing themselves that it's all down to the situation or luck, and that everybody sees themselves as highly complex and unpredictable, but past behavior is the best predictor of future behavior. So for any leader to understand what they are like, what they usually do, and in particular what reputation they have, will help them predict mistakes and make better decisions, understand. So that's the first one. Second one, and in relation to that, is that people are generally not very self-aware. 5 or 6 decades of social psychological research have shown very consistently that most people are deluded. They're self-deceived. The person they think they are is very different from the person that other people see. And they tend to think that their self-views are more important than other views on them. This is getting worse and worse with the years. Now we're living in a very narcissistic culture where anywhere we read things such as, don't worry about what other people think of you, you can be anything you want, if you think you're great, you're great, stop worrying about others' views of you. And that's utter nonsense. The people who are most effective in the relationship and making decisions, they understand how they impact other people. And really, our meaning about who we are, our self-views, should be shaped by others' views of us. There's a wonderful David Bowie quote on this that says something along the lines of, "I am only the person the greatest number of people think I am," which makes sense in the context of his characters because he was changing all the time. But yes, our identity is owned by others. Who we are is crowdsourced, and if you look at a 360 and everybody thinks that you're obnoxious, there's probably something there that is true, right? Even if you think you're great. And the third one concerns decision making, which is really, and this is consistent with what behavioral economists have found, that most of the decisions that people make on an average day are rapid, are irrational, are unconscious, and because of that, around 50% of the decisions we make are wrong. It's about, you could flip a coin and the baseline of successful decisions will be about the same. And what happens usually is that after we make a decision, when we have to justify why we made it, we rationalize in a way that makes us feel good about ourselves, okay? And if you look at all the heuristics or biases that exist, most of them, if not all, are led by a desire to maintain a positive self-view or self-concept, So, which explains why people have cognitive dissonance. So if they're working on something that pays really low, they persuade themselves that it's fun. If they're, doing something that, if they made a mistake, they blame it on others, and so forth. So when we developed our decision-making and judgment model, basically, we try to answer one main question, which is, in what specific ways are you biased and are you irrational? So for example, some people are more likely to attend to threats, others rewards. Some people pay more attention to the big picture, others to the small picture. And some people are more intuitive, some people are more data-driven. So we try to decode your decision-making styles. And we also provide you with an estimate of how coachable you are, which is based on the idea on whether you are more or less open to feedback. You know, if 50% of the decisions that you're going to make are going to be wrong, it matters how you react to your mistakes, because that will help you avoid repeating those mistakes in the future. So that's what we call coachability. You know, if you look at the proper definition of learning agility, it's the same thing. It's learning from mistakes. So we believe that the best leaders are not just smarter and not just you know, better in the sense of having more expertise or having a higher IQ, but they're also more aware of how they think, how they make decisions, and that awareness enables them to repeat or to avoid mistakes, or surround themselves with people who can provide some diversity in thinking and complement them, right? So that they don't see the world in just one way. And on top of that, they tend to be more coachable. They are more receptive to negative feedback. They don't want positive reinforcement and praises. They're very self-critical, and they want to know what they do wrong. They don't blame others. They blame themselves. They accept responsibility, and then they change their behavior accordingly. We cannot predict what decisions leaders will need to make in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time, maybe even next week, but we know that these characteristics will lead to more effective decision making, and then everybody benefits. The more senior a leader is, the more people benefit. Organizations are in the hands of leaders, and it is mostly their decisions that drive the course of events.